In the early hours of the 18th of July 1938, a rather flimsy, sorry-looking and frankly jerry-built plane landed at Baldonnel Airdrome. Its arrival had not been expected, and the authorities at the airport were astonished to discover that its pilot, 31-year-old Douglas Corrigan, casually claimed to have just flown from New York. Corrigan, a Texan of Irish descent, was a pilot and engineer who'd worked with the Ryan Aeronautical Company in the construction of Charles Lindbergh's Spirit of St. Louis. This was the plane that in 1927 made the first non-stop solo flight from New York to Paris. Corrigan had made his own first solo flight in 1926 of rather more modest dimensions, but he'd been severely bitten by the flying bug. He quickly graduated to stunt flying, much to the annoyance of his employers at the AirTech Flying School in San Diego, whose planes he was jeopardizing. Corrigan paid no attention to their disapproval, simply taking their planes to a more distant airdrome and performing stunts there during his lunch hour, unseen by his bosses. As we shall see, the watchword for Corrigan seems to have been out of sight, out of mind. In 1933, he spent $300 on a 4-year-old Curtiss Robin monoplane and started to modify it. To put this into some perspective, the Spirit of St. Louis cost more than $10,000 to build. Corrigan had decided he wanted to emulate Lindbergh, but he was going to target his ancestral home, Ireland, as his destination rather than Paris. When he applied for a license to make the trip in 1935, he was turned down on the not unreasonable basis that his plane was a glorified wreck, incapable of surviving the trip. No amount of modifications over 2 years would make the authorities change their minds. Based in California, Corrigan flew his plane across the USA in July 1938, barely making it to New York before a gasoline leak got him first. He then filed a flight plan for a return trip to the West Coast. He took off on the 17th of July at 5:15 in the morning, but instead of turning west, he headed east. He afterwards claimed that low cloud and a faulty compass had brought about the slight error that took him out over the Atlantic. Nobody believed him. Most people who knew him were aware of his obsession.
Starting off from New York on Sunday morning, I started to fly to Los Angeles, but some way got turned around above the clouds, and after about 26 hours of that, seeing nothing except clouds, I came down through the clouds, and the country looked a little strange. Then when I found the biggest city I could see and found the airport, the first one I found, after landing there, they told me that I was in Dublin, Ireland, so I had to believe them.
28 hours and 13 minutes after takeoff, Corrigan landed at Baldonnel. He'd survived on 2 bars of chocolate and 2 fig bars, had to get his bearings by looking out of the side of his airplane because he'd placed his fuel tanks in front, had no radio and a 20-year-old compass, which he almost certainly didn't bother to read until he knew he was over the Atlantic and not New Jersey. An American journalist with the delightful name of H.R. Knickerbocker, who interviewed Corrigan in Ireland after his epic journey, wrote 3 years later that you may say that Corrigan's flight could not be compared to Lindbergh's in its sensational appeal as the first solo flight across the ocean. Yes, but in another way, the obscure little Irishman's flight was the more audacious of the two. Lindbergh had a plane specially constructed, the finest money could buy. He had a lavish financial backing, friends to help him at every turn. Corrigan had nothing but his own ambition, courage and ability. His plane, a 9-year-old Curtiss Robin, was the most wretched-looking jalopy. Corrigan's mistake might not have gone down well in official aviation circles. His license was suspended for 14 days and his hero, Charles Lindbergh, never acknowledged his achievement. But he was a big hit with the general public and returned to a hero's welcome in the USA. He received a ticker-tape parade in New York, reckoned to have been attended by more people than actually greeted Lindbergh.
The pride of the Irish roars into a New York welcome aboard the liner Manhattan. And down Broadway, the pride of the Irish is buried beneath a mountain of waste paper. On the steps of the City Hall, we're introducing Douglas Corrigan.
Later, he starred in a movie about his own life called The Flying Irishman. delighted in the nickname Wrong Way Corrigan, and endorsed numerous appropriate products, such as a watch that told the time backwards.
I just hope that if I make any more mistakes, they'll turn out as successful as this one.
Douglas Wrong Way Corrigan took off from New York, bound for California, and got conveniently lost 77 years ago on this day.